Everybody, today is December 12th, 2017, and today we're going to be doing something very special. We are going to be resurrecting a classic of Cube Computer Company. We are going to be resurrecting the Cube Computer Plexi, the original Cube computer from 2006. So in case you're new to my channel, let's go over some history of the Plexi. To get ourselves a good understanding of the Cube Computer Plexi and how Cube Computer Company started overall, we have to go back to the fall of 2005. I was starting my freshman year at Hopewell High School, and I was needing to find some extra classes to take for electives. Yeah, sure, I had options like band and PE, which I did take. However, there were a couple other slots I needed to fill in. One class I took was computer applications, which was just learning about how to use Office and all that good stuff. However, there was another class that was available called computer engineering. Computer engineering was a very interesting class. It was taught by Michael Healy, who was a very interesting guy who had a long history of dealing in the IT field. If I'm not mistaken, I think at one time he actually met Bill Gates. So yes, at the time I was relatively new to computers. I had no idea what many of the components were except for motherboard, CPU, RAM, hard drive, and things like that. I didn't know too much more about the components in general. And it was this class that really got me started on computers in general. Later during the year, Michael Healy announced that we would be building Cube computers at the end of the semester. However, we didn't really hear much about that until the end of the semester actually got near. It was during that time that we were tasked with looking up components for a PC, including price, source, things like that, to ensure that we had a full computer. So many of the students went online to sites like Newegg.com, Zoxide, Tiger Direct, places like that, to gather up a list of computer hardware, including the case, motherboard, power supply, all that good stuff, the whole deal. During that semester, we were taught about the history of computer hardware all the way back to the days of the Altair and stuff like that. It was also during that school year that Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools was doing a hardware refresh on their computers at the school. They were going from the old 2000 or 2001 compact Desk Pro EN systems and switching them out with brand new Windows XP systems from HP compact systems. So essentially, all the old computers and components, the towers, the monitors, the keyboards, the mice, all that stuff was delivered to room 529, our room at Hopewell High School, where the computer engineering class was taught. All of those computers were delivered and stacked in the back of the room, really high. Lots and lots of computers that we all went through. It was also during that time that we received delivery of several pallets worth of plexiglass sheets, large rectangles and small rectangles. It was also during that time that Michael Healy, the teacher, presented a working prototype of a Cube computer at the front of the class. It was a simple setup with just your plain Jane components, power supply, and drives on the bottom half, and motherboard sitting on the top half, similar to the Plexi that you see today. Roughly about a month or two before the end of the semester, or the school year rather, it was time to start on our final projects, building the Cube computers. Lots of hot glue guns were brought out, and during that time the class was tasked with dissecting these old compact Desk Pro ENs. We weren't keeping the chassis, we were just removing the power supplies, the motherboards, the drives, all that good stuff, just stripping them of their components. We would have a stack of motherboards in one area, a stack of power supplies in another area, a stack of hard drives in a different area, a stack of CD drives in a different area, all that good stuff. And it was then that we built our Cube computers with all this hardware from these old compact Desk Pro EN systems. And then at the end of class, we were told that we get to take these computers home for free, so they were ours to keep. While it's definitely questionable how many of these computers were kept by their students for many years later, there was one in particular that would be around many years later. That is the tried and true Cube Computer Plexi. So in June 2006, I got to bring the new Cube Computer 1 home. That's what I call it. I call it the Cube Computer 1 at the time. This was before it was actually named the Plexi. I remember bringing this thing home from school, and at the time my parents dropped me off and picked me up from school. So I got to sit up front with it in my lap. Students walking by saying, "Hey, look at that thing. What is that thing?" And I say, "It's a computer." They're like, "Oh, wow, that's awesome." I remember one person thought it was like a, literally, they thought it was like a DVD player. Yeah, of all things. So now it brings us to the summer of 2006, when we officially have Cube Computer Company. So May 2006 is when we built the Plexi, or the Cube Computer 1 as I originally called it at the time. And that was when I officially started off Cube Computer Company. In the Computer Engineering 1 class, we didn't learn much of anything about operating systems. We learned about computer hardware. So essentially these computers, whatever OS they had was whatever was still on the hard drive. In that case was Windows 98 SE. Yep, Windows 98. But at the time Windows 98 was old and it was almost out of support, and I would much prefer to have Windows XP on the computer. So during the summer of 2006, I bring the Cube Computer 1 over to Timmy Lee Payne, a good friend of mine who lived in the neighborhood with us. He also had been working on computers for many, many years, for probably about 15 years at the time, I guess. So I bring this thing by his place, and he was amazed at how it looked, saying, "Hey, that's cool to see components out there on the plexiglass frame like that. That's really cool." And the first thing he did was he helped me go over a few things. One problem I had was the CPU was getting a little hotter than it should, because it needed to have thermal compound, and of course the heatsink was crap. And Timmy was able to get that fixed up, and he also assisted me with installing Windows XP on the Cube Computer Plexi. It was around that time I actually named it the Plexi. So I had Windows XP on this computer, and I also upgraded the RAM from its original 128 megabytes to 384 megabytes. And this is pretty much the amount of RAM that the Plexi had all throughout at its time. It was just the motherboard had 3 DIMM slots for PC 133 SD RAM, and I filled every single one of them. So by August of 2006, the Plexi is up and running with Windows XP and a Pentium 3 933 MHz processor. Nothing too special, but for its time it was decent enough for internet browsing and things like that. With the help of Timmy, I actually got a head start on learning about operating systems and learning about many different things about the computer. And that's when I started Computer Engineering 2. In Computer Engineering 2, also taught by Michael Healy, we focused on operating systems such as Windows 95, 98, 2000, ME, XP, and at the time the new Windows Vista when it came out in early 2007. Now some of you may think that me and Mr. Healy had a great friendship and a great bond. Yes, we did have that, but we did have some rough times, I have to say. This is really interesting. I may actually do a video on the side about this. This was, you see, 2006 and 2007 was 2007 was the year that I outsmarted my computer engineering teacher, thanks to the help of Mr. Timmy Lee Payne. See, in December 2006, I wanted to get some upgrades for the Cube Computer Plexi. I wanted to get rid of its original 20 gigabyte hard drive in favor of a brand new, at the time, Western Digital 160 gigabyte SATA hard drive. You're thinking, a SATA hard drive on a Pentium 3? Yeah, that's exactly what I did. With the help of a PCI SATA controller, I was able to affix a brand new 160 gig ID hard drive to this computer. And also at the time I didn't know much about computer power supplies. I was relatively new to the subject of power supplies in general. And essentially, for Christmas I got the Western Digital 160 gig hard drive, and I also got a CoolMax V400 400 watt power supply. Well, the unfortunate thing happened on Christmas evening. I pulled out the original compact light-on 200 watt power supply from the Plexi and plugged up the brand new CoolMax V400 400 watt power supply. And as soon as I hit the power switch, bam, smoke. I was like, oh no, what did I do? Well, the power supply itself was not the problem. The power supply was following all of its simple rules. There was no defects with the power supply, although it was a cheap one. There was actually nothing wrong with the power supply itself. It followed the ATX standard for the pinout. Now here's the interesting thing. This is a 2001 motherboard, or 2000 or 2001 motherboard, socket 370 Intel, that had a 24-pin ATX connector. Yeah, 24-pin. Now, in 2000, I don't even think the 24-pin was even a thing out. I mean, it wasn't really common, at least in the regular desktop market. However, the compact Despro EN featured a 24-pin proprietary wired ATX connector. At the time, I did not realize that. I mean, at first I thought the motherboard was this messed up. So, during the beginning of the spring semester of 2007, I come back to class and I'm like, Mr. Healy, my motherboard burnt up. I replaced the power supply and it burnt up. He's like, that's fine, Nick, we'll get you another motherboard. So he grabs me another compact Despro EN motherboard and I take it home, plug it up, bam, same thing happens again. And I'm like, what's the deal here? I got a brand new power supply and this motherboard is fried. It was then I realized that the pinout from the power supply was not exactly the same as the motherboard was wanting. See, this particular motherboard, the extra 4 pins were used for something kind of interesting. They weren't used for supplying power, they were actually used for controlling the speed of the fan in the power supply. See, the compact Despro EN had 2 fans in it. It had one on the CPU and it had the power supply fan. And the way Smart Fan worked in this particular model of desktop computer was, if the CPU fan increased speed, so would the power supply fan to help draw more air through the system. As that was the primary means of ventilating air throughout the case was, again, the power supply fan. So, essentially, I believe the way this worked was, the power supply sent 2 wires from the fan, I mean, at least from the unit itself to supply power for the fan. Those went to the motherboard, and through the motherboard was probably a PWM controller, which sent out an additional 2 wires back toward the fan. And of course, the fan in the power supply did not actually have a tack on it. It was just a simple positive-negative wired delta fan. So essentially, this computer had a very proprietary design. So again, I had to go back to Mr. Healy and say, Mr. Healy, this second motherboard I don't know what the deal is. It fried. And this time, I just went back to the original power supply. And that's when I installed the hard drive and all that good stuff and got Windows XP back on it, and the Plexi was running again. So one thing about Michael Healy was he taught both computer engineering and computer programming. He was actually more knowledgeable in programming than he was with computer engineering. Which brings us to the second little disagreement. See, I had just got this brand new, of course, I got the brand new hard drive and the brand new SATA Link PCI controller card. Mr. Healy seemed to think that the controller card was why my motherboard was frying. Simply because the PCI card had 2 notches in the bottom of it, whereas the motherboard had 1. He was like, Nick, you can't use this PCI card because because the notches don't line up. However, there's one thing that Mr. Healy did not realize, and I was able to quickly research online. The PCI slot, depending on your motherboard, may have the notch on one side or the other, depending on which would mean whether the slot runs on 3.3 volts or 5 volts. And some cards are universal, some cards are not. By looking at the slot, or actually by looking at the connector on the card, where the notch was would tell you what voltage that card was designed to run at, whereas other cards were universal, such as this SATA Link card, which had 2 notches, so it would fit on either style motherboard. That one semester where the motherboard's fried, Mr. Healy had to give me a C grade for that semester, and when it came time for the parent-teacher conference to come around, that's when Mr. Healy and my parents had a huge disagreement. See, Mr. Healy didn't exactly realize that I had a friend right there in the neighborhood who had been working on computers for many years, and he figured out the problem. It was, of course, again, the proprietary power supply. It wasn't nothing to do with a mistake I made, except for plugging in a power supply that had an otherwise identical connector to a motherboard that normally would work just fine. Mr. Healy made remarks saying that your son has fried multiple motherboards, and by working on computers it's a risk he may burn the house down. My parents were not particularly happy about that, because they disagree with that, and they stated otherwise, that my son has a friend right there in the neighborhood who's been working on computers for many years, and he has consulted with them, and then we highly disagree with what you say about our son. So that brings us to April 2007. I want to upgrade the Plexi to something better than a Pentium 3. In the back room in Hopewell High School room 529 was an Asus P4B533-VM motherboard, micro ATX motherboard. That was a socket 478 Intel for the Pentium 4s. And I asked Mr. Healy, could I have this motherboard? And he said, yes, go right ahead, you can have it. So I take this motherboard home, and I go on eBay and I buy myself a Pentium 4 1.7 GHz Woolly Met processor for roughly about $8 on eBay. I also picked up an all-copper Thermaltake heatsink and fan assembly, and since my mom's e-machine that year fried the Bestech ATX 2V12E power supply, took out the motherboard, I had some extra parts available, including RAM, DDR RAM. So all of that stuff, including that brand new Coolmax V400 400 watt power supply, I had all the stuff available to build the brand new computer, or upgrade the Plexi rather. However, even though I was relatively sure that the motherboards from the compact desk Pro ENs were proprietary and did not have the same pinout for the ATX power supply, I still had the worry in the back of my mind that something was going to fry when I hooked up this power supply. So I took it over to Timmy Payne, and he actually helped me out with this because I was relatively new to this particular platform. He hooked everything up, and I walked outside, covered my ears. I was just worried the thing was going to fire up and it was going to pop again. He flipped the switch and pressed the power button, and it started right up. And I was like, oh, okay. So as I continued to learn more about computer hardware, we're nearing May 2007. This was where the Plexi ended its time as a full-time computer for many, many years. In May 2007, I was nearing the end of the Computer Engineering 2 term. I was like, I'm ready to, I like the Plexi, but I want to go in and get something a little bit bigger. So, in May 2007, I went on to Zoxide.com and purchased a Zoxide Ecstatic 2 computer case for $29.99. Yes, guys, that is the case of the Cube Computer Mid-Tower Deluxe. And it was at that point that I stripped down the Plexi of its components and built the Mid-Tower Deluxe. The chassis of the Plexi set over to the side for about a month or two, and it was at that point that I broke it down and put it up in storage. And there were actually a couple of times here and there where I did reassemble the Plexi, but it was never for a full-time computer. It was just for experimentation. For example, winter overclocking out on the back porch on a cold night. So yes, the Plexi for many, many years never got to see full-time use. The Mid-Tower Deluxe was the successor to it back in early 2007, and the Plexi has never actually seen full-time use up until now, 10 years later. So that's an overview of the history of the Cube Computer Plexi, where it all started, and essentially where Cube Computer Company started, and also when the Plexi was succeeded by the Mid-Tower Deluxe. Now, I'd say it's time that we go in and rebuild us a Plexi. It's time for the Plexi to come back to Cube Computer Company and Cube Computer Channel. Okay, now that you've watched over the history about this machine, you may now realize just how big of a thing this is for me to get to finally rebuild this thing. Lots of nostalgia. Yeah. There's a whole lot that goes behind this computer, I'll tell you. So essentially, it's just as simple as this. You have two of these. Actually, I'm gonna grab the other one. I got a spare. This is the actual spare. It's the least scratched up. So we have two of these. and 2 of these. And you may realize why it's called the Cube Computer Plexi. It's just the entire thing is framed out of plexiglass, just a thicker variant of it. And I have already gone through the process of trying to get almost all the old hot glue off of this thing. It was a real mess. Yeah, this thing's been neglected over the years. It's really sad to say. This was the formal piece that actually housed the motherboard. You can see it's got tons of screw holes in it, and it's scratched all the crap. That may have actually been the bottom piece being scratched up so bad, because this thing never actually had feet on it, but we're going to fix that today. So this is going to be the new upper piece. This is going to be the new lower piece. Unfortunately, this piece here is pretty scratched up, so it's going to end up getting put to the back of the machine. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate that I don't have access to this stuff anymore. I could probably order some, but tracking it down may be kind of tricky. I think Hopewell High School had this stuff custom cut, if I remember. I don't know for sure. I just remember seeing this stuff in the back of a room on a huge pallet. Yeah, because everybody in the class built these things for several years. And as you may have seen in the history of this machine, the name Cube Computer Company started out with this computer. Fall 2005, Michael Healy, the teacher, told the class that at the beginning of the class, at the end of the school year, we'll be building cube computers. So this is going to be the new bottom piece. The glue gun should be warmed up by now. Yeah, this thing's held together with hot glue. This is how they built them in high school. This is how they put them together. And I'd say for the most part it has worked relatively well. I don't think I've had any problems with the thing coming apart, to be honest with you. So what we're going to do now is one of the parts computers, the parts laptops, sacrificed his rubber feet today for the Plexi. So we have 4 little rubber feet thanks to the Toshiba laptop. The laptop that was going to replace the Inspiron 1525, but it was too much of a piece of crap to do so, and ended up getting parted out. So what we'll do is carefully dot these feet with hot glue and stick them in the corners of this plexiglass. Try to do this without burning myself. Like I say, try to do this without burning myself. Stick these in the corners. So that way when I move the machine around on the desk, it's not gliding against the bottom of the plexiglass. There's a better view of what I'm doing. Yeah, it'd be amazing if I was building this thing brand new from scratch with brand new plexiglass sheets, but that's unfortunate, but oh well. I'll try to get these as centered as possible in the corners. No guarantees. We'll have a little bit of overshoot from the glue. Oh well, that's okay. And of course the hot glue dries relatively fast when it hits that plexiglass. So it always makes a good connection. It has always worked well with these acrylic pieces. See, these first two are seem to be staying in place just fine. One thing's for certain, we'll probably have a lot of stringy glue left over. I'm using the good old clear stuff, which is cheaper and, of course, makes sense to use on this machine. It will look kind of bad if I use my black glue sticks on this. As I press down, it just melts it right away. I mean, dries right away, rather. Get that mixed up. I gotta flatten this glue whenever I can, so that way it simply glides on the rubber feet and not the glue itself. Okay, let's flip this over. Bingo. Now, why didn't I do this in 2006? Well, of course, in 2006, there at the school, we didn't have. Well, we may have had a lot of rubber feet to deal with, but I don't think nobody ever think to actually use them on their machines. But fast forward 11 years later, oh, we finally get the idea that it's good to put rubber feet on your Plexi. As you see, I'm just gliding this around, and it's just fine. There's about, I don't know, about 3 or 4 millimeters of clearance between the plexiglass and the bottom. And this stuff's good and thick, so shouldn't have any problem supporting the weight. It has a little bit of flex to it, but that's not, I don't think it's going to be too big of a deal. Okay, it's time to go ahead and start putting the supports in place. There's going to probably be a little bit of excess around the side, but that's okay. These are going to be the joints that are most important on this computer. We don't want them to be any bit loose at all. I'm telling you guys, the nostalgia factor is very high right now. It's feel like I'm going back 11 years ago building this thing. Now what's interesting is, I'm not sure if I mentioned it or not in the history, but most of the Plexi computers were built using guts from compact Despro EN systems that were built in probably 2001 or 2000. They were retired school computers. That's what they were. They were retired school computers. They were refreshed with HP compact DC 5100 MTs, if I remember right. You know, those infamous machines. Didn't have a whole lot of failures with them, but they were just something about them. You got tired of seeing them after a while. So, you know, crappy old CMS computers, as a lot of us call them. Some of the later ones had an issue where sometimes it wouldn't detect the RAM on post and would just give you beep errors. I'll never forget one day right there in the school library, one did that right in front of my English teacher, and I unplugged the machine, popped the side panel off, and reseated the RAM, and it started right up. I'll never forget that. Right there in front of the teacher. So we'll make sure these are good and flat as possible. That one there's getting pretty stable. Also, to note, the computer power supply will also help stabilize the back end. And always add just a little bit of extra. Just to help ensure that it's good and stable. And now we'll be adding this piece. This right here. It'll go around the front. Now this piece here was not from the original Plexi. This was added on, I think, in 2007. This piece here was something I made in middle school in a machines class. It was quite interesting. I think it was like computer-aided machinery or something like that. It was really, really neat. So what I'm going to do now is figure out exactly where I want this. I'm going to place it a little lower this time, I think. I think it just goes really good with the rest of the machine. Put some glue in the center of it and snap it into place. Try to make sure I get it as square as possible. We'll just let that dry. Now with this build of the Plexi, we'll try and make it as original as possible, but I'm going to make some improvements as well over the original design. So we'll get to that here in a moment. Now we're going to go ahead and install the top piece. So we got a relatively unused top piece. This actually came off of somebody's abandoned Plexi. I got this back in 2009. And for all I know, there might be another piece somewhere up in my parents' attic. I really don't know. This was actually already here in the tech room. Yeah, somebody tried to build a Plexi machine using an AMD Socket 7 K62. I don't think that went over too well. Yeah, a lot of people went, because we didn't just have the guts of the compact Despro ENs, which of course were Intel Pentium 3s. We also had just random donated computers that were in. We even had an E-machine in there somewhere with a fried Bestech ATX 25012E power supply. Yeah, we had lots of random stuff. Go ahead and apply glue to both of these pieces here. Got to be a little quicker this time before the glue dries. Keep my fingers crossed I get this right the first time. Looks like the back half is leaking just a little bit. The back support might not have went on there exactly the way I would like for it to. But at this point, it's like, oh well, we're just going to go with it. Because if I remember right, the original Plexi, it wasn't perfect either. I think I have both of the horizontal halves assembled relatively well. At least lined up anyway. Yeah, when we assembled these things, we didn't really use much of any like rulers and things. We just used our eyes, pretty much. I'm going to add some additional glue around the tops of these supports, again to ensure that we have a good connection. Because the original Plexi was stable enough to where I was able to carry it home from school. Now back then my parents picked me up from school, so I didn't have to take it on the school bus to get home. However, just the walk from room 529 to the front of the school was a pretty good walk on its own. And just also sitting out there with it, fully assembled, waiting on my parents to pull up. Didn't have any problems with it collapsing or falling apart or anything. I think we may have had a couple of students there in the class who had that issue, but I don't think they assembled theirs nearly as well either. Yeah, guys, hot glue is what holds this entire thing together. Now, if it was sitting out in the sun, yeah, that would probably be a problem. The good thing about the hot glue is, for the most part, if I want to tear it down, I can do so without really ruining the sheets of plexiglass. Truth be told, after the Metal Lux came in 2007 and I tore this thing down, I think I did reassemble it a couple of times, but it never really made much of a presence on Cube Computer Channel. Yeah, the Plexi was never really around much ever since the Metal Lux was built. And I thought, after moving over here, I was like, well, the Plexi has a chance now. Because the Tech Room computer was built using, well, it's down on the floor. It was built using my 2009 Next Gen Deluxe E-Machines chassis. You know, the custom E-Machines chassis I designed. Cut a hole in the side of the panel and fitted in some plexiglass and spray painted the thing silver. Looks pretty cool. However, for being a Tech Room computer, you want to have easy accessibility to components for testing and things like that. And that machine just did not offer ease of access at all. That was one big downside to it. And of course, with the Plexi, you have easy access to about everything. So now comes a part where we're going to make some improvements over the original Plexi. As you see, the thing is pretty dang stable as it is. So that's it. Yeah, now I'm not going to actually be carrying it like this with a full load of hardware on it, but that's pretty much it. Looks like an H when we sit on its side. Of course, it has a little bit of flex back and forth, but that's to be expected. The improvements I'm going to make to this over the original design, and just a little more hot glue to this. One of the big flaws that the original Plexi had was the motherboard just practically set right on top of the Plexi chassis. I think I did have some standoffs on it, if I remember right. However, the motherboard itself was just a floating ground. And also, you know, on top of the fact that the motherboard was just more or less a floating ground. I mean, of course, it was connected to the power supply unit's ground, but you see, in addition to that, expansion cards were not really held in with much of anything other than hot glue. Yeah. I mean, literally. One time back in, I think it was 2006, and of course we had a cat back then. Cat jumped off the bed and actually snagged himself into the cords going off the side of this thing. When I walked into the bedroom, the video card was like this. Thinking the side of my hand as the bottom of the video card. Just barely sitting in the AGP saw on the motherboard. Computer's still running. Yeah, it was still running. Luckily, nothing got fried. So, to combat those two issues, I present you this motherboard tray for a micro ATX motherboard. This came out of an HP Pavilion Tower from probably 2000 or 2001. It was one of those, not the really small chassis. Well, it might have been, but I think it was from one of the slightly larger variants that had a removable motherboard tray. See, the neat thing about this is you can sit right on top of the machine like that. And in addition, first I have got to get rid of this big bulge here. Okay, first thing I did is I took a hammer to this thing and flattened it out quite a bit. It's still not 100% flat, but it's a lot better than it was. So now I just got to go ahead and bend it back straight with my vise. Yeah, this is a new thing to the tech room. I've only had this vise in here for about a month. Use that to flatten things out here. But you know, we gotta ensure that the motherboard has a good flat tray to sit on. Let's see how it sits on there now. Not too bad. So essentially the motherboard is just going to sit flat on the top of the Plexi like that. And the expansion cards have a place to go, and also the I/O shield plate has a place to go. Let's see, this is a little warped too. I need to fix that. Just a few light beats of the hammer should fix that. Okay. Sit it right there. And there we go. I'm going to move this just a little ways back. Perfect. It's like it was made for it. Yeah, that's fantastic. So I'm going to try a little something different here with mounting this. I'm going to glue it in just like this. See, the thing about it is it don't have to be a super spectacular bond. Just enough to keep it on there good and sturdy, which practically as soon as I glued things down, it's already, I say, good and sturdy. So yeah, we're definitely making some progress here. I'm starting to see a Cube Computer Plexi come back to life. Sweet. Well, okay guys, it's that time. This machine is going to have to sacrifice itself to make room for the Plexi. It's time to tear this one down and get the components out so that way we can transfer them over to the Plexi. Oftentimes the side panel that sometimes can be a real pain to get off of there. And yes, this thing is loaded it's loaded down pretty well with hardware. So, everything but the CD and DVD drive has got to go. So we'll go ahead and start disconnecting things. Jeez. 4 USB headers on this motherboard. Yeah. It's a nice motherboard for its time. Socket AM2 Plus board. When I got this, it actually had a Phenom. I forget exactly what model Phenom processor it had. I took it off because it was a 125 watt CPU and this motherboard was only rated for I think 95 watt chips, so I took it off of there. It currently has an Athlon 64, I think it's a single core. Nothing too fancy, but I have noticed some lag in performance in this machine, even for the simple tasks that I have it doing. So I might be doing some overclocking with this thing sometime down the road. You guys might be surprised to what I might slap in there to overclock. But that'll be, again, as I say, that'll be sometime later on. It won't be right now anyway. I've got other things to look forward to, such as hopefully upgrading the mid-tower Lux by 2018. Not sure if that's going to happen or not, but yeah, we'll see. Gotta snap these zip ties. Yeah, I tell you, cable management's all great and all until you go to need to take something out or add something in, or you know, something like that. Yeah, I got something a little better for that. Yeah, good riddance, you zip tie. You're going on. You're getting off of there right now. Goodbye. Nice knowing you. Get out the way. And I got these two extremely long SATA cables. You'd be amazed where these actually came from. They didn't come out of a custom built machine. No. They come out of a Dell XPS 400, I think. Both of them came out of their own different machines there, but they were both Dells. Those Dells that took on the BTX form factor. They had to have very long SATA cables to get from the motherboard to where the hard drives were. The power cables were just about as long. And speaking of power supplies, we're going to be transferring this unit over as well. It's what I call the cherry red supply. I have 2 of them. I bought them in 2009 for about, I think, $25 a piece. And no, they're not gutless wonders either. They did have bad caps in them to start out with. The caps failed after about 2 years of use. I had to recap them, but other than that, these have been pretty decent units. They are a bit 5-volt heavy though. They would be more appropriately fitted, let's say, an Athlon XP or a Pentium 3 according to the way the power is distributed on this. But they do give you 20 amps on the 12-volt rail, which is enough for a basic machine. Yeah, 42 amps on the 5-volt rail. What is this, 2001? Yeah, the power supply is made by Wintech, which they've made some pretty decent units and they've made some pretty crappy ones. Just about all their units they decided to use the crappy old JEE capacitors, or Fuji's or one of them crappy brands. But yeah, I think these were actually the old stock units. Newegg had them available. They're actually branded as AtPower or Dynapower USA. That's actually the brand they were sold under. So it helps if I have a Phillips screwdriver. Let me go find me a screwdriver. So I guess we'll go ahead and unbolt the power supply since it's already out. I mean, the connectors are loose. If I remember right, this thing shipped with brass colored screws to match the grill of the fan. These are quite some nice looking units too. Again, they are a bit more, like I said, they are kind of a dated design. They have a more heavier 5-volt rail than they do 12-volt rail. And they also have a minus 5-volt rail, which has been exempt from the ATX spec since I believe version 1.3. The reason why I think these are new old stock units is because on the back the year on the warranty sticker is 2005. And it's funny, they put the warranty sticker in a place where you wouldn't have to worry about breaking it to get inside the unit. Yeah, that's fabulous. Yeah, this is one of those Wintech units with the one big heatsink. I have some videos somewhere on the channel of looking inside of one of these, or when I was recapping it. And from a quick glance, the the Jamicon caps I put in there are looking just fine. Yeah, I used some caps out of Best Tech Power Supply, and for the caps in the back, I used Sanyo caps off of the Daddy Machine's motherboard, and they too seem to look okay. Alrighty, so that's the power supply. I know I focused quite a bit of my time talking about it, but we'll set it out of the way. Now for the motherboard. Motherboard is a Gigabyte GA-MA7-4GM-S2, which I believe is a socket AM2 Plus. It's definitely AM2, obviously, because of the processor that it has on board. Now this next gen deluxe case that I designed back a while ago, this was done. This case was designed back in the summer of 2009. I don't think I have any videos of it on the channel. Of course, back then my channel was Bike Geek CCP. But of course, all my uploads from 2007 are on Cube Computer channel. Most of them are anyway. Except for the ones that contain like a lot of music and stuff like that, like copyright music. Back then I didn't know much about YouTube and how music worked. And yeah, this motherboard again, it's a pretty sweet looking motherboard for its time. It's got 4 USB 2.0 headers, a total of 8 ports. It has 6 SATA ports, SATA 2 by the way. It has a COM port. Yeah. Even has a freaking parallel port on the back of it. That's funny. So if you have some old printer that you need to use, well, this motherboard has you hooked up. I've never really experimented too much with this motherboard to see how well it could overclock, but of course that'll probably change sometime down the line. So there's the main board. And we'll of course pop out the shield, because we'll be transferring that as well. And we'll go and take out our hard drives. I'm going to keep those in their existing caddy. Because I have plenty of E-machine hard drive caddies laying around. These are quite heavy too. It's a 1 terabyte and a 120 gigabyte. The 1 terabyte I think is a 2 or 3 platter drive. It's an older one. Oldie but goodie. It still works fine. Definitely not as fast as your newer hard drives, but came out of a trade-in machine that was used for parts. Had 2 of them. And of course the poor next gen deluxe will be going back into storage for a little bit. I think I'll find a use for this thing sometime later on. That'll be more permanent. But hey, it got nearly a year of use over here. So can't complain too much there. It does need to be repainted though. If you look on the side carefully, you can see where I took a Dremel and actually scribbled in Next Gen Deluxe. You can barely tell, you have to look at it sort of at an angle, but it looks pretty cool though. Okay. Well, it's time. Time to put this thing together. I think this power supply will look pretty cool on this thing. It's got a UV reactant main cable sleeve and has an LED fan there. It used to have an LED fan there too. Actually, no, that fan wasn't LED, it was just clear. But I did replace it because it was running, sounded kind of rough. I just replaced it with a Jamicon fan out of the Bestech power supply. You know, with the mass failures of Bestech ATX 25012E power supplies and E-machines, I had tons of old parts out of Bestech units. The Jamicon fans are pretty reliable too. I don't think I've ever had one fail. Mid-Tower Lux has 3 of them. 2 of them are in the front to cool the hard drives, and one is a 92mm fan that's on the radiator, and it hasn't failed. Believe it or not, it came out of a cheap power supply that had the Jamicon fan itself and an ADA fan in the rear. Alrighty, so this thing seems pretty well stable. Just going to plug in our hot glue gun, and we'll go ahead and fit the power supply into place. Glue gun's, yeah, it's still warm, so it should be about ready to use. See, the design of the Plexi, it gives you just enough room to fit in the power supply. And it fits toward the back. Pretty easy. I'm going to do it like I've always done it, have it pretty much centered. That's why you can definitely tell the back support was 100% straight, but that's okay. It's good and stable, so that's pretty much all that matters to me. Let's go ahead and lower the camera down so we can see what I'm doing a little better. Okay, now let's go ahead and glue this thing into place. It's about where I want it. Be feasible enough. So let's hope this doesn't harm the paint on this thing if I decide to remove and replace it with something better in the future. It's not often you get computer power supplies that are painted fire truck red or candy apple red. This is the one that powered the Black Max for 5 years about. Let's see. It powered it up till 2013. And currently a High-Pro HP 305 7F3R powers the Black Max. You know, the power supply about the same as the model that Hardware Insights actually was able to pull over 400 watts out of without actually self-destructing or anything like that. It actually handled it. Another thing that's interesting is these rubber feet make this thing a lot more resistant to sliding around. Because if I remember right, this thing was pretty easy to slide around, which is not necessarily a good thing. Okay, power supply is in. Now I'll go ahead and install the hard drives. Actually, first I'm going to put in an optical drive. Okay, so I'll stop video first a little bit to sort of brainstorm how I'm going to arrange the hardware on this thing. And this is one area I'm also going to improve on over the original 2007 Plexi. See, the thing about the 2007 Plexi was getting access to the CD drives. You had to go around to the side because the CD drive faced out this way, which wasn't a problem considering the Plexi was at the time sitting at the left edge of a desk. Now here it's a little bit different story. It won't be quite as easy to get access to the side over here at times. So what I decided to do is I decided to put the CD drive sideways facing forward, which should be fine. Now none of this has actually been glued in yet. So I have optical drive here, media card reader here, one hard drive cage here, and in the future I could put an additional hard drive cage in right here. Now of course I'm not needing an extra hard drive cage right now, so I was going to pull that back out. But this will give the machine plenty of room for expandability down the line somewhere. And for our ports, of course, some of you know that I collect ports off of old cases when I scrap them. For example, this is a 2 USB 2.0 with a headphone and microphone jack. And of course, the Tech computer does not have any speakers hooked up to it, so at times I may want to plug in a pair of earphones or something to listen to audio. Or if I decide to use this computer for other things, which I may sometime down the line, I think I can fit these right in here. And I've already went through the pleasure of taking the famous nail nose pliers and smashing down part of the metal just a little bit to make this fit in better. So I'm thinking something like that would fit quite nicely. Now, this card reader here, I don't think supports SDHC. That's a common problem I have with older card readers that I get. They support SD, but not SDHC or high capacity. Now, currently I don't have a need for support for SDXC cards, but you know, in the future I may. But primarily, I do need to have support for SDHC. Now, I don't commonly plug in SD cards into this machine, but there may be times where I might get backed up on importing files off of my SD cards, my SDHC cards, and I need to get stuff off of them in a hurry. I could have one importing on the Mid-Tower Lux, and I could have one importing in here on the Plexi. So that's one reason why I like to have an SD reader on this thing. But until I know for sure that, until I have a chance to test through all my card readers and see if I can find one that supports SDHC, I'm not going to actually install one yet. That'll be for later. I do have this one here, which takes up a lot less space, but it doesn't have a faceplate on it, so you have all these exposed contacts. I'm not really a big fan of that. It will look kind of ugly sitting there too, really. So I'm not really for that. I may go on Amazon or somewhere and just buy a 3.5-inch drive bay card reader, or I might buy a brand new card reader for Mid-Tower Lux, one that uses USB 3. I don't know. Not sure about that yet, but I'll go on Amazon and just pick up one of these that supports the current standard and install it. Now, one thing I'm curious of, and one thing I've tried looking up before, is possibly updating the firmware on one of these to support SDHC cards, because I believe they're pin compatible with the newer cards. They just don't know what to do. You plug in an SDHC card and the light will just stay solid, and it's just doesn't know what to do because it doesn't recognize the format of the card. Now, I'm curious if anybody has ever been able to actually flash firmware on one of these to make them support newer cards like SDHC. Feel free to post in the comments about that. Anyways, let's go ahead and fasten our CD drive and our hard drives in. Okay, so when it comes to the hard drives, I don't want to put way too much glue in there to where it's terribly difficult for the thing to get removed in case I need to replace or upgrade a hard drive. But I still have enough room where I can pop a screwdriver in there and pop it loose. Usually the glue will give way pretty easily when you introduce a screwdriver. So that's that. And we'll go ahead and mount the optical drive on its side, which should be fine. The only thing that's going to be kind of tricky to sneak glue in here. I don't think it's going to be possible really, but that's one of the things you run into with building a Plexi. It can be a little tricky. Another thing is making sure I have enough space in there to run cables through, which I should. Now the optical drive is a traditional IDE PATA device, so it might require a little bit longer cable to sneak in there. Yeah, we'll see. Try to get this lined up with the front of this thing. One thing's for certain, that glue starts taking hold pretty fast. Now for extra stability, I may want to add a little bit of extra stuff. Like, let's say, a snap-in piece off the front of a case or something to help stabilize this CD drive. I'm gonna add some glue to the side over here. Now I've already tested this drive and it does work. That's a good thing. Well, now that I remember, the USB ports I'm going to add will help stabilize it on the top end. So let's go ahead and fit those in there, see how they do. I just got to do a little test fitting right quick just to see what I'm looking at here. I probably could have had the CD drive over a little closer. Yep, probably should have. I probably should have. Let's see. Yeah, see, it just pops right out of there with enough force. And we'll just pop that glue up, and we'll redo it. Okay, I went ahead and pulled the CD drive back out, as you've seen, or I think you've seen as long as the camera was going. And I decided to reorganize it a little bit. I put the ports in first this time, and now I'm installing the optical drive. And the card reader is back in. It's not actually glued in, it's just sitting there. I'm using it as a reference to give me enough gap for when I go to install an actual card reader. I'm going to pile in some glue right here. I'm going to try to anyway. A little blotch right there at least to help bridge the gap just a little bit between this half and the CD drive. C drive seems to be good and stable now. Where it matters, at least. Up front. We'll go ahead and pull the optical drive out. Not optical drive, but media card reader out. Yes, I'm tired. Been tired all day. Okay, that's pulling out. Now I guess we'll go ahead and install the motherboard. We're going to install the I/O shield plate, and I'll tell you, when building computers, if you're going to get cut on something while building a PC, if it ain't the sharp edges of a cheap-end computer case, this is what you would commonly get cut on. It's happened to me. I'm sure it may have happened to you. If you built computers before, it may have happened to you. These things can be so aggravating to deal with. Sometimes they go in quite easy. Sometimes they're a real pain. Quite literally a pain to get in. Okay, this one actually went right in, so I'm quite happy about that. So now I'm going to install a motherboard. And I think for probably the first time on a Plexi, we actually get to just bolt it right into place. It'll actually be a bolt-in install. Start fitting in some screws. Okay, so it's in there. Motherboard's installed. Time for a picture. In case you're wondering what all the racket is in here, yes, I'm heating with wood tonight. It's really cold outside. It's supposed to get down to like 23 tonight. Winds are blowing about, let's see, 10 to 20 miles an hour with a wind chill of about, I'd say, at least 30 degrees right now. So yeah, it's getting cold out there quite quickly. Okay, now I got the computer on its side. You might be wondering what the heck am I doing now. I had an idea with this new build for the power LED and hard drive activity LED. I figured, why not make the top half be the power indicator and the bottom half be the hard drive activity indicator. Well, to do such, we're going to tap a hole into the bottom of this thing. For the, what is it? I got to drill a hole through the bottom half for the LED to stick inside of. I also got to do the same for the top half. Yeah, I wish I'd have thought about this earlier. So, now the machine is sitting on its side, and here I'm about to take my drill and drill into the bottom of the plexi glass. Yeah, not the most comfortable about that, but do what you gotta do, I guess. Make sure I got a decent enough sized bit, which I think that should do it. It's close enough. I can wiggle it around if needed. Oh, jeez. Alright, here we go. I'm thinking right about, yeah, right about center right there would be fine. We're almost through. Okay, so my idea is for this thing to sit. Ah, perfect. That's perfect. Just like that. Because my idea is the LED will light up and it will reflect around the edge of the entire thing. And we'll see how that goes, but okay, well that part's done. Ooh, that drill bit's nice and warm. I didn't think it'd be too hard of material to drill through. I mean, it's just acrylic, really. But still, when you have all your hardware already in there, it's kind of makes it a little nerve-wracking. And you can see this thing flexing just a little bit. Yeah, putting it to a pretty hard test there, I'd say. The thing's pretty freaking heavy with all the stuff on it already. You know, the power supply's got some heft to it. The two hard drives really do. And now here comes even something that might be even a little more nerve-wracking. Hard drives are right below, and I'm about to tap a hole right there. Yeah, guys. After I record this, that way you get to watch this happen. Fingers crossed. I gotta do this again on next time on the top. Right next to the motherboard, shall we? These ain't the best drill bits. They come with the whole little kit. You know, this thing here, it has all these different size bits and stuff like that. Okay, well, that's done. And we didn't break any hardware, so feel a lot better now, to say the least. Okay, now let's put the drill up. Alright, now let's go ahead and attach our LED indicators. The hard drive one is the hard drive activity indicator is already there. Just gotta put a little bit of glue next to it to secure it. And there is enough wire. So I've already got the header plugged into the main board. And getting the glue gun in there's gonna be a little tricky, but we'll manage. We better be able to manage if the thing will stay in place. Like I have no idea how this is going to look, but I was like, what the heck, let's try it. Don't need a lot of glue, just enough to secure it in place. That way it'll be relatively easy to take it out if I decide to remove it for whatever reason. Let that dry in place a little bit. And we'll do the same for the power LED. Now this power LED I know for a fact is very freaking bright, so it's a good thing I don't sleep around this computer. You know, I used to sleep with the Mid Tower Deluxe when at the old place. This one has that blasted thing behind it, but oh well, what can you do? It might actually help keep it in place, if you think about it, but Again, we don't need a lot, just a little bit of glue. Now this bundle of let's see, the bundle of LEDs and power button actually came off of, you know, a machine actually came off of a compact Presario, which of course means it does not have a reset button. So I'll have to go back and add one. I've got more buttons. I can just add one later on. Let that glue settle in and dry us a little bit. I'm going to probably add a fan to the top of this thing, just like the old Plexi had. It won't be tonight. It is getting pretty late. I just want to get this thing done and actually make sure it starts up and runs. I need a little more glue on that thing, because that LED is actually quite a bit smaller than the hole that it's in. I just went ahead and used the same size bit, so that way if I want to put a traditional LED in there sometime later on, I can. That way there's enough room for it. And while that's drying, we'll go ahead and place the power button. I guess right over here. Something of that nature. I'm not going to place any buttons down toward the bottom because those would be too easy to accidentally press. Now, whenever I go to install the reset button, I'm going to be very conservative how I install it. Try to install it in a method, in a way to where it can't easily get hit, so I don't accidentally reset the computer by mistake. That would suck if I'm doing something major with it, like a file backup or what have you. But this is pretty much the service computer. Place the power button right on the front. Okay, so tonight I'm just going to go ahead and hook everything up and make sure it runs, and then at a later time I'll go back and try to tidy up the cables some. And what do you know, looky here, we already have a problem. The CPU power connector is not reaching. Oh, that's lovely. It is literally 5 inches from reaching. So that means I'm going to have to add in additional cable to this thing. Well, that sucks. I was hoping to have this thing up and running tonight. Now this cable here is perfect length. Nothing wrong there. Fit around the side like that, and yeah, that's perfect. Another gripe I have about this thing is this power supply has 20 gauge wiring on the P4 connector on the ATX 12 connection. Again, like I said earlier in the video, what is this, 2001? Which even in 2001, when they started introducing the Pentium 4, this connector should have 18 gauge wire, not 20 gauge. The Bestech ATX 312E power supplies in the E-machines have this same thing. Now, I haven't actually seen any problems with it, but then again, at the end of this cable, you're probably getting more voltage loss because of it. I mean, it's literally like inches away. It is that close. So come on, we were so close to having this thing run tonight. Dang it. Okay, I've went ahead and fixed the problem with the power supply ATX 12 volt connection. I have extended it. I've also went ahead and tidied up the cables, well, figuratively speaking. On a Plexi machine, it's not the easiest to tidy up cables. Now, this is going to be the TeknoAXE PC if it wasn't already obvious. So we have extra SATA cables, 2 extra SATA cables, and 2 SATA power cables and a Molex power connection. All just tucked away in here for whenever I need them. I went ahead and soldered in an extension for this cable and heat shrinked the connections. As you see, it's plugged in right up there. Guys, we have reassembled us a Plexi. It's been many years since... Oh yeah, this thing, it takes a good bit to slide it over. As mentioned, it's been many years since Cube Computer Plexi has been on YouTube, or at least with the exception of the old videos. Yeah, what do you say? It's time to start this thing up. Okay, everybody, I discovered a minor flaw in my motherboard placement. In its original spot, I would not have been able to add in expansion cards because the slots on the cards where they protrude through were just hitting the plexiglass and not seating all the way. So I had to shift the motherboard tray about 4 millimeters to the left, and as you can see, I have covers in place and they clear just fine. I've went ahead and installed the new logos. I've also tidied up the cables quite a bit. Of course, I already mentioned that, but this machine does not just have logos on the front, but around back we have something very special. Of course, if it weren't for Mr. Michael Healy, the Plexi may have never happened. If it weren't for the amazing computer classes he had at Hopewell High School, there's no telling what would be of today. As you see, I have placed a photo of Michael Healy on the back of this computer. He was a very amazing person. Hard to believe it's almost a decade since he was killed in a car wreck. So yes, Mr. Healy drove a Corvette, for those of you who are into sports cars and things like that. I think I already mentioned this earlier in this video, but what took Mr. Healy's life was the back end of his Corvette losing traction and spinning around, and he was ultimately hit by a tanker truck. Very tragic, very sudden, very sad. He was a very special person. And if it weren't for him and also my late buddy Timmy Lee Payne, Cube Computer Company and Cube Computer Channel probably would not exist today. It was his class that ultimately got me hooked in computers. Yes, I did have some interest before after watching my mom make repairs to her E-Machine's computer. But it was Michael Healy's class that got me started on where I am today. And Michael Healy would sure be proud to see this computer. So now, it's time to power this machine up. Alright everybody, power's plugged in. Everything hooked up. It is time to power on this machine. Oh, that looks pretty cool. Not sure if the hard drive activity LED is... Yeah, it's back there. It's just not very bright. Not as bright as I'd hoped it would be. I had to turn out the lights to see it. Now we can see it. Oh, that's sweet. Yeah, the power LED is a whole lot brighter. I already knew this to begin with. So I may have to track down a different LED. Probably one out of a flashlight or something like that. One of those bright ones. Not necessarily, not a Cree LED, but one of the earlier generation ones. But wow, does that look nice. Turn off the light in the bathroom. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, now the hard drive activity LED lights up a little better. You can wait, at least you can see it a little bit better. Very nice. Also, you can probably see the fan in the power supply. Well, guys, the Plexi is back. Finally. After many years of being dormant, the Cube Computer Plexi is back and better than ever before. That looks amazing. That looks really amazing. The power LED lights up very well. Again, I just need to track down a brighter hard disk activity LED and I can swap it in. Not too much to it. Hey everybody, I sure hope you guys enjoyed this video from Cube Computer Channel. Remember to like the video, subscribe to Cube Computer Channel for more updates, and remember to tick the bell so that you actually get notified of these updates. Did you know that I am also on a second channel that's Cube Comp MTDX? Over there you'll find videos of bicycling, weather, elevators, and all sorts of other neat and interesting stuff. Feel free to subscribe to that channel as well. And again, I thank you for your support, and thanks for watching this video.